Something about NASCAR right now feels fundamentally broken, and Bristol Motor Speedway has become the proving ground where the entire sport's credibility hangs in the balance. Two massive developments are colliding at the exact same moment: a complete tire overhaul announced with almost zero warning, and a 2-week Easter break that froze Tyler Reddick's historic winning streak mid-flight. NASCAR and Goodyear didn't just tweak the compound or adjust air pressure recommendations, they engineered an entirely new tire setup specifically for the NASCAR Cup Series, delivering fresh right-side and left-side rubber designed to perform consistently across wildly changing weather conditions. This isn't a routine adjustment. This is emergency surgery on a track that's been bleeding credibility for 3 consecutive race weekends. Bristol Motor Speedway has exposed a fundamental engineering failure that NASCAR couldn't ignore any longer. Temperature became the invisible assassin of competitive racing at Bristol. Low temperatures combined with Bristol's notorious concrete surface caused the rubber to shred and chunk into jagged pieces that looked more like debris than racing compound. The visual evidence was damning. No black rubber racing lines building up across the track surface meant no real racing grooves developing naturally, which translated directly into fewer passing options and predictable follow-the-leader racing that fans absolutely torched on social media. NASCAR Cup Series teams will have an all-new tire setup for this weekend's race at Bristol Motor Speedway, shadowed with Goodyear providing new right-side and left-side rubber designed for consistent performance in changing weather conditions. The stakes couldn't be higher because this isn't just about one race weekend. This is about whether NASCAR can prove it still knows how to engineer competitive racing at short tracks. The horsepower equation adds another layer of complexity that could either produce legendary racing or catastrophic unpredictability. NASCAR has increased the horsepower to a maximum of 750 for all cars in the Food City 500. Goodyear will also deliver a softer tire for the race. The combination of the two is expected to provide more thrilling racing at this important regular season race. Translation: drivers will have significantly more throttle sensitivity, which means more opportunities for wheel spin, more potential for driver error, and exponentially more chaos in traffic situations where precision throttle control separates the elite from the pretenders. The engineering logic sounds perfect on paper. Softer tires create more mechanical grip and lay down rubber faster, while increased horsepower forces drivers to actually manage the throttle instead of running wide open. But Bristol's concrete surface has destroyed every previous assumption about tire behavior, which means teams are essentially gambling on incomplete data. The November test session provided Goodyear with mountains of telemetry and real-world performance data, but the translation from test conditions to race weekend execution remains NASCAR's most consistent failure point. A tire test last November gave Goodyear a ton of data to use in developing the new tires for this year. Justin Fantozzi, Goodyear Director of Racing for the Americas, stated the fundamental problem with unusual clarity. The objective at our Bristol tire test in November was to develop a setup that is less temperature-dependent at laying rubber down. He continued with the most revealing admission: we heard loudly from the teams about variations in weather between practice and race conditions. The track took rubber in November under cold temperatures and again at the March OEM wheel force test. That statement confirms what fans suspected. Previous Bristol races were engineering disasters because the tires performed one way in Friday practice under warmer afternoon conditions. Then completely differently on Sunday under cooler race day temperatures. The organizational decision to limit this new tire exclusively to the Cup Series creates a fascinating split-screen experiment that will play out across the same weekend at the same track. The O'Reilly Auto Parts Series and Craftsman Truck Series will roll on the same Goodyear setup that's been used at Bristol since September 2022. This isn't an oversight. This is NASCAR deliberately creating a control group to measure whether the new Cup Series tire actually solves the temperature-dependent fall-off problem or just creates different unpredictability. Fans will literally watch 2 different tire behaviors at Bristol Motor Speedway across the same weekend, which provides unprecedented comparison data but also risks exposing the Cup Series tire as an expensive failure if the Xfinity and truck races somehow produce better racing on the old compound. If NASCAR and Goodyear can hit the mark on these tires and find a balance between the severe fall-off seen in the past and the lack of fall-off that lets drivers go 150 laps on a single set, the racing could be at its peak on Sunday. The best-case scenario produces multi-groove racing with natural passes for position, strategic variety between long-run and short-run setups, and actual tire management skills separating the field. The worst-case scenario? Another unpredictable race where strategy collapses because the tire either falls off so quickly that everyone has to pit every 30 laps, or doesn't fall off at all and eliminates pit strategy as a competitive variable. Adding 750 horsepower to an already unpredictable tire equation means one outcome is guaranteed. Sunday will produce either spectacular success or catastrophic failure with zero middle ground. The Easter break created an unusual emotional pause that froze competitive momentum at the exact moment when Tyler Reddick was rewriting the record books and Chase Elliott was mounting a legitimate championship challenge. The NASCAR Cup Series had an off week for Easter weekend, with Bristol Motor Speedway scheduled to host the next race on Sunday, April 12th. NASCAR has operated with relentless momentum since February: Daytona, Atlanta, Las Vegas, Phoenix, Fontana, Martinsville, Charlotte. A brutal 7-race stretch that produced historic performances and championship-defining moments. Then suddenly, nothing. Complete silence. The competitive calendar just stopped, which creates psychological uncertainty about whether teams return to Bristol sharpened and focused, or whether they come back flat and struggling to rediscover race weekend rhythm. While on hiatus, the Cup Series was upstaged last weekend as the other two national series headed to Rockingham Speedway, where 19-year-old William Sawalich earned his first win in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. Hardcore NASCAR fans still had racing content to consume, but the absence of Cup Series competition created a noticeable void in the weekly rhythm that defines the sport's cultural presence. The narrative momentum shifted entirely to the Xfinity Series and developmental storylines, which matters because casual fans don't follow NASCAR between Cup Series race weekends. They disappear entirely from the conversation until the next Sunday broadcast. The momentum heading into the Easter break was absolutely dominated by two drivers who represent completely different championship narratives. Chase Elliott won the Cookout 400 at Martinsville Speedway, paving the way as the best Chevrolet in the NASCAR Cup Series driver standings. Martinsville represented vindication for Elliott after a frustrating start to the season where speed didn't translate into finishes. The Martinsville victory proved that Elliott's team had solved their consistency problems and positioned him as the clear Chevrolet championship threat moving forward. But Elliott's one victory pales in comparison to the historic dominance that Tyler Reddick unleashed across the season's opening stretch. Tyler Reddick made history at Circuit of the Americas, powering the number 45 Toyota to victory. A week earlier at Atlanta, Reddick became the 6th driver to win the first 2 races of a NASCAR Cup Series season. At COTA, he became the only driver in NASCAR history to win the first 3. The statistical dominance is unprecedented. Tyler Reddick has won 4 of the first 7 races in the Cup Series and is looking for victory number 5 at Bristol in the Food City 500 on Sunday. The NASCAR Cup Series standings remain led by Tyler Reddick, who holds 353 points after 7 races. And the points gap isn't just comfortable, it's psychologically devastating for competitors who know that Reddick has already banked enough playoff points to essentially guarantee his championship eligibility, regardless of what happens over the next 15 races. The Cup Series had its first off weekend of the season due to the Easter holiday, meaning Reddick is guaranteed to hold the points lead up until at least the race at Bristol Motor Speedway on Sunday, April 12th. The enforced break created an unusual situation where the competitive narrative froze in place. No one could challenge Reddick's points lead, no one could add wins to their playoff resume, and no team could generate momentum heading into Bristol. Teams either spent the break refining their Bristol setups and studying the November tire test data, or they used it as genuine rest and recovery after a brutal 7-race stretch. There's no middle ground. Teams that treated the break as preparation time will dominate, while teams that genuinely rested will spend Sunday scrambling to catch up. There are few better places to restart the NASCAR Cup Series season than the last great Coliseum. Rested and refreshed after 2 weeks without turning left, drivers get back at it with Sunday's Food City 500 on FS1, a scheduled 500-lapper covering 266.5 miles at the 0.533-mile layout in Tennessee. The symbolic weight of restarting at Bristol cannot be overstated. This track has defined short-track racing for decades, and NASCAR chose this moment to deploy completely untested tire technology with increased horsepower on a surface that's already proven unpredictable. The combination of factors creates maximum unpredictability, new tire compound, increased horsepower, post-brake resets across all teams, Tyler Reddick's hot streak, Chase Elliott's Martinsville momentum, and a track surface that could either reward the new tire or expose it as another failed experiment. Reddick's driving style works well around Bristol's unique configuration, which is a short track that races like a super speedway. His ability to maintain momentum through the corners while managing tire fall-off has been the foundation of his 2026 dominance, and Bristol's high banks reward exactly that skill set. Chase Elliott brings completely different strengths. His ability to read a track as it evolves throughout a run and adjust his driving style accordingly makes him exceptionally dangerous on weekends where tire behavior is uncertain. Denny Hamlin enters with strong short-track history and multiple Bristol victories on his resume, which means he knows how to extract maximum performance even when the tire doesn't behave as expected. Wildcards like Carson Hocevar and Ross Chastain thrive in chaos, and Sunday's race will absolutely produce chaos if the tire performs inconsistently across different temperature windows. Developing a strategy and plan for Bristol Motor Speedway is one of the toughest chores that teams face. If the new tire adds exponential complexity because teams don't have race distance data showing how the compound behaves over 100-lap runs under green flag conditions. Crew chiefs are essentially guessing, educated guesses based on November test data and March OEM testing, but guesses nonetheless. The increased horsepower means drivers who overmanage the throttle will lose time on corner exit, while drivers who are too aggressive will spin the tires and destroy the right rear compound before halfway. The margin for error is microscopic, and Sunday will separate the teams who nailed their Bristol preparation from the teams who guessed wrong. The bigger championship picture reveals why Bristol matters far beyond one race weekend. The upcoming stretch includes the Advent Health 400 at Kansas Speedway on April 19th, the Jack Links 500 at Talladega on April 26th, the Coca-Cola 600 at Charlotte on May 24th, and eventually the NASCAR Cup Series Championship at Homestead, Miami on November 8th. This Easter break isn't just a scheduling pause, it's the reset before a grueling, defining stretch of the 2026 season where championship contenders separate themselves from pick-and-iffy pretenders. Tyler Reddick can either extend his historic dominance or watch his points lead evaporate if the new Bristol tire doesn't suit his driving style. Chase Elliott can build momentum off his Martinsville victory or fade back into mid-pack anonymity if Chevrolet can't match Toyota's speed. NASCAR and Goodyear are actively trying to fix the tire issue instead of accepting mediocre short-track racing as the new normal, which deserves acknowledgement even if the execution remains uncertain. And every time a new tire solution gets announced, the fundamental question remains unanswered. Did they actually find the balance between performance and durability, or did they just trade one problem for a different problem? The horsepower increase to 750 adds genuine excitement because more power at Bristol means more throttle control required, more pressure on drivers, and more chances for dramatic moments when leaders make mistakes in traffic. This race will separate the field. The teams who adapted their setups and driver approaches to the new tire will win, while the unprepared will lose badly. Make sure you're subscribed to NASCAR Nation Report because we're pushing toward 15,000 subscribers, and we need real fans who actually care about the engineering and strategy that decides championships. Drop your prediction in the comments. Did Goodyear get this tire right, or are we heading into another unpredictable mess that destroys competitive integrity? Sunday at Bristol might be the race where everything changed, or it might be the race that proved NASCAR still hasn't solved its short-track crisis. Either way, you need to watch.